I see them coming in. We're so glad you're here to join us for our next edition of our 49er Industry Chat. My name is Noemi Guevara, and I'm the Director of Alumni Engagement here at Cal State Long Beach. Before we start our awesome session today, I would like to let you know if you have any questions throughout the chat today, please enter them in the Q&A box, and we will make sure our speaker addresses them today. And now I would like to introduce James Almada, council member for the CSUB alumni, and he graduated in the class of 2011. Take it away, James.
Thanks, Noemi. I appreciate it. Welcome, everyone. I'm so excited to have you all here. I got a chance to kind of chat with our guest speaker a little bit to talk about what we're going to learn a bit from him. Before I introduce him, I did want to just quickly introduce myself so you all know a little bit about me. I work actually on campus. I work for an auxiliary nonprofit, and I manage the communications and marketing department for CSULB. So very exciting work that I get to do with our alumni and, of course, our students mainly. And so I think opportunities like this are really grand and awesome, and I appreciate the alumni for putting this on and together. So today, let me introduce our guest speaker, who I'm really excited to hear from, and let me go ahead and read his introduction. After I read the introduction, I'm going to let him talk a little bit and kind of give us more information. But of course, if you have questions, we have a Q&A box, we have a Q&A box at the bottom, also a chat box if you have questions, but mainly for questions, try to use that Q&A box at the very bottom. And then we'll kind of, we'll navigate this conversation together. So without further ado, Mr. Brian Doyle is a proud alumnus of Long Beach State University, having earned his BA in economics in 1987. He has more than 30 years of experience and has held a variety of positions in the residential real estate business. Only 4 months ago, Taylor Morrison acquired William Lyon Homes, one of the largest Western home builders. The merge resulted in a company that is in the top 5 nationally in terms of annual homes delivered. In this transaction, Mr. Doyle, our speaker here today, transitioned from the role of Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer of William Lyon Homes to now Area President for the West of Taylor Morrison. In his new role, Mr. Doyle oversees the operations of the company's 5 divisions in California, Oregon, and Washington. Leading our industry chat today is Mr. Brian Doyle. Welcome, Brian.
Thanks, James. Good afternoon, everybody. It's great to have this opportunity, and I appreciate Cynthia reaching out to me and inviting me to join. I thought this would be kind of fun, and frankly, I think about 35 years of work experience, and I really felt a need to start to give something back, and I hope maybe a little bit of this will give something back. Hopefully it strikes a chord. Maybe I say something that resonates, and certainly love to get questions. A little bit about myself. So I made my way to Long Beach State actually from Golden West College in Huntington Beach. I was studying architecture, and I thought I wanted to be an architect. I worked for an architect for about 1.5 years, and I figured out I didn't have the patience, nor could I draw, so it sort of excluded me from being an architect pretty quickly. I transferred to Long Beach State. I wanted to get a degree in business. Unfortunately, the business school was impacted, so I decided to go by way of economics, which actually was something similar to architecture for me. It was something that was really interesting to me, and actually allowed me through electives to get the business classes that I wanted to get to. But really enjoyed my time at Long Beach State, and it was kind of interesting, when I think about my career, and I'll talk a little bit about that, but my career actually began in my last class at Long Beach State. I was taking a sociology class over the summer and struck up a friendship with a guy sitting next to me, and we had a lot in common, and one of those was baseball. Both of us played baseball through high school and really enjoyed, playing baseball, and he was still playing on a softball team with his company. He'd actually already graduated. Or got a job, was working for General Foods. And so he asked me, hey, why don't you join our softball team? And I wasn't working for him yet, but I said, great. And he goes, yeah, we play Tuesdays and Thursdays. So we'd go and we'd play. And then afterwards we'd go out and have beer and pizza and, get to know all the guys on the team. Well, lo and behold, all the guys on the team are all guys that are in leadership positions at General Foods. I'd been interviewing with banks and financial institutions because I thought that's where my economics degree was going to take me. And none of that seemed really interesting to me. And these guys were going, hey, have you thought about getting into sales? And I said, no, not really. And they said, your personality and you're outgoing and we think you'd be really good in this role. And I said, great. And I said, come interview with us. So I go to General Foods, it's in Anaheim, and I interview 4 people, 4 of which I play baseball with or softball with on Tuesdays and Thursday nights and drink beer afterwards. So those interviews are slam dunks. And then I got to interview with the division president, and that goes pretty well. So they offer me a job, right away. And it was a really good learning experience. I worked there for about 2 years. I got a lot of wonderful training. I got to understand how a big corporation functions and works. I understood the politics of how a big company works. It wasn't necessarily for me because I had other interests, like if I go back to architecture. But one of the points I kind of wanted to make was you just never know who you're going to meet and what that person might be able to do for you somewhere down the road. And James Hecht, who was that person, just became a friend. And, it started with softball and it turned into a job that turned into the beginning of my career path. But one thing that really stuck with me when I was talking with them and interviewing with them, they said, hey, look, you're always selling something, whether it's you're selling an idea or you're presenting an idea or you're talking about, we're trying to, buy a piece of property or we're trying to sell houses or whatever. There is a salesmanship component to it. And that involves a lot of listening. It also involves a lot of, really thinking through and being prepared. So it was a great first job to have, right out of college. And like I said, I'd been working really hard to find, I've been interviewing and found that, it was hard to get interviews, number one, really hard to get second interviews. And I hadn't had any job offers. And it was amazing how, just forming a relationship with somebody turned into, really the first step of my career. After doing that for a couple of years, I had got my real estate license. Like I said, I studied architecture. And my dad was a small developer in real estate and real estate broker. And I wanted to get into that area of either home building, real estate, something. And so I started exploring it, started to send my resume out. I got a call from a builder who was out of San Diego, small builder out of San Diego called Pacific Scene. And they just opened up an office in Orange County. And they were looking for a director of sales and marketing, of which I was not qualified to get. But somehow or another, I convinced them that, hey, I'll work really hard. I know something about sales. I've done a little bit of management in those sales roles. I can do this. And I've got my real estate license. So, and I was willing to work for very little money. So they took a chance on me. And that was my entree into the home building world. And so, that was 1988-ish. The market was on fire. Things are great. I'm thinking this is going to last forever. Then 1999 shows up and the world crashes. And my company's going out of business. Every company's going out of business. And a couple of my friends, again, acquaintances, people that I got in contact with in the industry, had moved over to go work for the FDIC, which most of you would probably know is the people who insure our deposits at our banks. But what they were doing was they were taking down failing banks. And with failing banks came real estate assets. And with all the real estate assets that they were bringing in, they didn't have real estate people that were working for them. They were bankers. They were, full-time government employees. And so I got the opportunity to go to work for them at first as an asset manager, which, basically I had a pool of assets, about 100 assets in Arizona that, my job was to put them on the value them, put them on the market and sell them and liquidate them. And, I parlayed that into working my rear end off and doing everything I could and volunteering for just about everything that could be done at the FDIC, to ultimately kind of running most of the Western United States relative to disposition of residential real estate. And so I spent 4 years there and liquidated almost $500 million worth of real estate. So it was, and a lot of really different kinds of real estate. So it was a really different experience in terms of, home building versus that. But I really wanted to get back to home building. So 1994, They came to me and said, hey, we're just about out of assets. So, your job's going to wrap up here in the next year. And so I got a chance then to go look for a new job. And 30 days later, I landed a job with California Pacific Homes, which is a offshoot of the Irvine company. Kerry Brin, who's Donald Brin's son, runs that or owns that company. And so I went to work for them as a sales manager. Spent a couple of years there, 3 years there, and then ultimately moved over to William Lyon Homes in a similar capacity in sales and marketing. But really what I wanted more than anything else was I wanted the opportunity to really touch all the components of the home building business, whether that was construction, whether that was land development, land acquisition, warranty service. Sales and marketing certainly was a passion, but I really enjoyed getting to know all the different parts of the business. And really the career path there was to become a division president, which you're basically managing an area, in this instance, Southern California, where you're managing, all those different aspects of the home building business. And so, it wasn't about the title. It wasn't about the money. Well, maybe a little bit about the money.
It has to be a little bit about the money. I mean, that's not bad.
It's always got to be a little bit about the money. But it was really that opportunity to be able to touch all the different components of the business and to be around a really dynamic team that was really, really good at what they did. And we built a fantastic team. And so I ran a division there, for a few years. Ultimately, we went through another downturn. And I ended up running the whole state of California. We had two divisions, one in Northern California, one in Southern California. And I ran both of those simultaneously for about 3 years, and then advanced to an EVP of operations, which really oversaw all of the operations of the company. And at that time, we were operating 7 divisions in 7 states, which I take that back, 7 divisions in 5 states. But ultimately, when Lyon sold, we had 10 divisions in 7 states.
Brent, I'm going to stop you there real quick, and then we'll get back. We'll pick up back on your career, like pretty much right there. But I just was writing down some questions that I thought would be interesting to kind of dive into, if you don't mind. And then I want to get back to it because you mentioned something like it sounds like you've had at least this maybe the 3rd major crisis you've had to manage through, maybe 4th.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. So I want to get back into that too. So that's why I want to stop you right there, and we'll get back to some of those things. One of the things I found really interesting, both reading your bio and seeing a lot about you, is you see this, grand experience and resume, but the first thing you shared was just a very natural way to find a job. It's just not you trying to impress these folks, but you really meeting these people and talking to them. And I found that so unique and interesting. Have you found experiences like that to be common, or do you seek those out, or is that just something that was just lucky at the time? Or any recommendations for we have some recent grads, we have some students, we have some, people looking to change their career. Any advice on that front? I just found that first interaction you described as so interesting, because comparing that to your current title and how much you're doing, it's just, awesome how you did that.
Well, I think it's really important. I mean, you cannot underestimate relationships. I mean, I think for me, and I talk to a lot of young people that are coming out of college. I get friends who say, my son's graduating, would you mind talking to him? And I talk to a lot of them. And I think probably my biggest advice to them is, hey, start reaching out to people and connecting with them. Can I get 15 minutes of your time? And maybe it's in the field you're interested in, maybe it's not. Utilize family and friends. Don't be bashful. Get out there and actually ask people for a little bit of time. People love to talk about themselves, and you just never know when you're going to come across somebody that you connect with that says something, that does something that somehow or another sticks in their memory and ultimately could lead to an opportunity. The other advice in that too is when you're done with that, ask them, is there somebody else you can connect me with, that is an opportunity for, me to talk to further about something else? Because you're really exploring in some respects, but you're also making connections and stay connected. I mean, relationships are hard. Anybody on this has had some kind of relationship, and they're not easy. I always think about a relationship, though, as I'm going to work harder at the relationship than they're going to. And I do that just because I want to make it easier on them. At the same time, I also want to demonstrate that I care about the relationship. And you just never know when that can, that translates into something else. I mean, every job I had, really with the exception of going to work for Pacific Scene, I never looked for. It was made by way of a connection with somebody that I knew that said, hey, you need to talk to them, or they need to talk to you. And that just comes through a lot of hard work. And like I said, you know, it's picking up, right now it's picking up the phone, it's getting in social media, it's getting into lots of different things. Nothing can, I mean, I love social media and I think it's a great avenue, but nothing can beat the power of personal contact. And I know right now that's a difficult thing to do, but I think just continuing to work and build a network of people that ultimately you just never know when somebody's going to come along and be that connection point for your next step in your life.
Do you have, when it comes to meeting these new folks, because sometimes people, at least from my experience and, you know, talking with a lot of our students and alum and stuff, can be that they find it a barrier to push themselves to do that part. Like they're feeling comfortable with meeting new people or putting themselves in this informational interview type of thing. You know, especially being as skilled as you are in selling things and marketing at some level. Is there any advice on that front for even maybe not naturally having that ability and kind of thinking that through?
Yeah, it's a little like public speaking. I'd say one is be prepared, have a plan, have a call list, have talking points. What is it that you want to, who do you want to talk to? What do you want to learn from them? Yeah, it's scary. It's scary early on. Yeah. And it's okay. And uncomfortable is okay. Yeah. I would tell you right now, if you're comfortable, you're not going anywhere. You're static, you're flat. Being uncomfortable, when you're uncomfortable, you're learning something, you're growing, you're developing, and it may not pay off right this second, but you have to find a way to push your way through it. My middle daughter is very introverted, you know, and she has a really difficult time doing that. And she has to push herself through those things for the exact same reason. I get it. She graduated 3 years ago and from college from Santa Clara, and she's really had to work really hard to get out there. And right now it's tough. It's hard to find a job, but I would tell you, you know, and maybe back to lessons learned in the past, and this goes back to high school. My first real job was working for Vaughn's, and the way you get a job at Vaughn's is every day after school, I would go in and not, you know, ask for the manager and ask him, hey, I'd like a job today. And he'd say, no, I don't have a job today, and I'll see you tomorrow. And I'm back and forth. And after, you know, 2 or 3 months, I finally got a job working at Vaughn's. And it just takes persistence. It takes pushing yourself out of your comfort zone. And I get it. It's hard. Practice in the mirror, practice, tape yourself on your computer. You know, look for ways to push through that. But I get it. It's scary.
You know, Brian, you reminded me of, you know, we've been doing a series of these with some, you know, really great alum from Long Beach State, and it's great to talk to folks. But you reminded me of a point right now that one of our previous speakers made last week, which is, you know, you find that goal, and then you keep pushing towards that goal. And for you, you're talking about this grocery store, looking for the job. You kept asking each day, every time you saw that manager. Is that a sense of persistence? Do you think that's a good mentality, kind of having that goal and looking at different ways to achieve it? Or is that something you do, or is that not something? It just kind of clicked for me, but I'm not sure.
Persistence is key. I just saw, you know, a note pop up there, and you know, is it okay to text? And I would say any means to get your name and your story in front of whom you want to get it in front of, do it. And you know, the worst thing that can happen is they say, stop calling me, stop texting me, don't call, you know, don't email me anymore. Mm-hmm. But be persistent. I think that's, you know,
because you're back in the same.
Not going to be anything that's going to happen quickly.
For sure. One of the other things that I noticed, and I want to remind all the viewers for sure, definitely if you have any Q&A, any questions, definitely throw those out there. We're going to be exploring Brian's experience and other advice as well, but if things kind of come to your mind, feel free to do that, and we can facilitate getting some of those questions answered. Brian, curiosity, I thought was interesting. You mentioned different departments and getting kind of a different experience in every area, and then you also mentioned not knowing exactly how it's going to pay off, but kind of having that. Was that something that made you do different, like work in different fields, even in the same general field? Because it sounded like you had a vast experience.
Well, I did, you know, and I have vast experience because I purposely went about getting vast experience, because if I wanted to be a division president, which is what I wanted to do, which oversees all those different aspects of the business, you have to understand what they do, why they do it, how they go about doing it in order to manage that. You really have to get yourself educated, about those different disciplines in order to be an effective manager. You don't have to be an expert at them. Jeff. The other part to it too is, I grew up in Huntington Beach. You live in this small town, and you never know what else is really out there until you go out and explore. And I think, especially if you're just graduating, you've just graduated, you're on the younger side, this is an opportunity to explore, because you don't know all the things that might be really, really interesting to you. You also might not know some of the things that you might go, I'd never do that. And sometimes finding out what you don't want to do is as important as finding out things that you do want to do. But you'll never know those things unless you go out there and try.
Was that something that you worked toward? Did you list some of those things out? And I need experience in this, and so you sought that. I think I talked to a lot of students. I have a student that I can think of last year who graduated, and she was talking to me about being superintendent of her home, her area back home, right? And she had a list of things, and she was like, I want to get this experience and that. I just wonder if it's similar for someone at your level in this field.
Well, again, like I said, for me, I knew where I wanted to go ultimately with my career, and then I knew all the different aspects of the business that was made up of. And so, the other key to that was going to work for a company that was going to allow me to explore those different areas of the business. So I think that's something else that's really
opportunity for you. Yeah.
Where you land, do you land in an environment that encourages that? Because some environments will discourage that. They want you in a silo, and don't color outside the lines. Don't go outside of your silo. And that might be right for some people. It's right for a lot of people. It wasn't right for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was very purposeful.
Definitely. So I want to get back a little bit to where you left off, which was, I think you were executive vice president at the time, and then kind of bring us into this kind of COVID age in your industry. If you don't mind bringing us from where we left off, maybe a little bit closer to now, and maybe what's happening and what are some things that our alumni should know about.
Yeah, so William Lyon Homes, was around for 65 years, founded by Major General William Lyon, who unfortunately just passed away about a week or so ago. And I got the good fortune to work with him for 22 years, and I got a ton of knowledge from working with him. But, we were on a path. We've been approached by multiple companies to purchase our company as a means for them to grow, for a mid-sized company to turn into a large-sized company. And so, this marriage with Taylor Morrison was really a great fit. And so, really that process started, late last year when we, entered into an agreement. Then we went through a due diligence period, and then a closing period. And then once you close, we closed on February 6th. And then we quickly go into integration, which was hard. We've been doing things a certain way in our company for a long time, especially for somebody like me for 22 years. And while it's still home building, it's a very different company. It's got a great culture, really great people. But it's also one of those where, you're learning completely different systems. You got to figure out who does what, and it's just very different. And so it's been an uncomfortable experience, but that's a growth experience, right? And I think that's something that I've really appreciated as we've gone through. So a month after we close, we go to shelter in place with COVID-19. Now all of a sudden, the world completely changes. Everybody's working from home. It's interesting to, and for probably the first 3 or 4 weeks until, the state's orders really got cleared up, it was really unknown as to where we were going to go. It was like, this could be a complete disaster of our economy. Fortunately, our industry was deemed to be an essential service, housing. And so we were allowed to continue to do business, but with really limited, conditions. Our company was extremely proactive in putting together, protocols for everything from, how many people could be in one place at one time, what the cleaning protocols were, what our hours of operation were, how do we how do we function in the sales environment? How do we function in the construction environment? How do we function in our office environment? I mean, it's really, really well thought out. And we put together a 3-phase program relative to getting back into, to business. Now, we still have to follow the state's orders. And then the states have orders, then the counties have orders, and all of the counties interpret the orders a little differently. And so we're in so many different places. The extreme would be Washington State right now is the most restrictive. We effectively almost aren't even open for business. We can only build houses that are sold. So we can't, we do a spec building, meaning we'll build homes for people on the idea that somebody will come along and buy it sooner or later. We can't do that in Washington right now. We can't open new projects which are ready to be open, which is, that's a lot of money just sitting in the ground, not doing anything, which is not, great for returns, but it is what it is. Our sales offices are locked with an appointment only sign on it. So you can make an appointment, come see a sales counselor, but only one at a time. And then you get to, I would say Texas, Florida, and even Southern California, we're back open for business. I mean, our sales offices are open. We can have gatherings of up to 25 people. So, we can have a grand opening of a project now, and we can start to interact with people. And you can feel it out and about too. I was out over the weekend and, people were out at restaurants. I've been out to a restaurant 3 times in the last, couple of weeks, which is nice. And I would tell you in our business, we're feeling interestingly really good.
Okay.
Sales were 17% above what May sales were for us last year, which is shocking considering a lot of our sales offices are locked and appointment only. In first week of June was really robust. So, people need housing, and low interest rates, I think, are driving that. I think, while we've lost a ton of jobs, I still think we've got a lot of people that are employed, and the economy is not dead. And so I'm pretty optimistic right now about what I'm seeing happening as the world reopens. And, I'm disappointed that, we hit this snag in the road, and it's troubling to see the civil unrest that's happening in our country. Those are concerns of ours too, and as they are for everybody and should be. But as of right now, I would tell you they don't seem to be impacting our business significantly.
I mean, I think people on this conversation are probably excited to hear that. I think that's a good thing. And because that means, for their industry, this is hopefully moving on up, right? So I guess a question that I would have is that if folks are looking to, we did get a question about, when someone's applying, let's say to your area, but they're not necessarily selling houses in real estate, but they do have the real estate license. And I'm trying to understand the question exactly, but I believe if they have a real estate license and they are selling properties, should they include that in their resume if they're applying for a different type of position that doesn't necessarily sell houses? And I guess
Sure.
the concern was that maybe the employer may think, oh, well, you're selling houses on the side on your time, but not, doing this other stuff, maybe finance or something. But that's something you have to have a conversation about. I mean, I think if you take a job, if you took a job with us, you're not selling houses on the side, and we prohibit that. So that'd be a conflict of interest. I think that's a conversation you have to have with the employer. But I would tell you that, that's additional education that shows some initiative, because you got to go out and do something to go get that real estate license. I think anything that you have that shows you've gone above and beyond, I'd say internships are another. Go work for free. I mean, I know nobody wants to go work for free, but go get some experience if you don't have any, because I think, again, just looking at the 3 daughters that I have, and that was the biggest thing that we talked a lot about as they were going through college, was go out and get internships. And like I said, even if it's working for free, to put something on that resume, and again, building a relationship with somebody that you've worked for, that you now have a reference from, that can mean something. So I think doing just about anything and any extra effort you can put into it, I think is valuable. Definitely. Okay. Got it. So that was one that we got. We did get another question, which of course is Brian hiring? I mean, that's always a question, but that's for later. You know, that's for a different day, for a different time.
Well, yeah, let me tell. Yeah, I actually don't. Let's not skip over it because I think that's a good question.
Okay.
So we along with just I think every home builder had a reduction in force in the last 2 months. We laid off about 8% of our workforce. I would tell you, given how busy things have become, I'm getting my division presidents now calling me saying, "Hey, I need to get some people back because we're all of a sudden, you know, we're beyond capacity in terms of the people that we have." And so that's why I say I'm optimistic. If things continue to go this way as we go through June and maybe July, I think you're going to see more and more companies hiring people back. I mean, again, I'm out at the restaurants. I'm seeing people at the restaurants now working again. They're excited to be working. I think there's going to get pressure put on our business because if it does continue to be, you know, busy, we're going to need more people than we have right now. So, I think at some point in the near future, if things keep going well, I think we will be hiring again.
Great. I mean, that's great to hear for a lot of folks there. All right. So I want to move to a couple other things that were just coming to mind for me and kind of your area. When it comes to home building, and with the pandemic that happened, I know it sounds like you guys are kind of pushing through it and it sounds like business is really there. But were there a lot of conversations about a virtual experience when it comes to properties and trying to do things like that? Prior, was that something that folks were looking at, or I'm just curious what that
So yeah, that is a great question. So, you know, before COVID, before Taylor Morrison, we were working on a platform that was really kind of stolen from the single family for rent arena. And that is, you go onto a website, you enter some information, you give them a credit card, and they give you a code, and you can go see the house, punch in the code, you go in the house, you can do you can do your own walking tour, or you can go online with, you know, probably just about, you know, Zillow, Redfin, whatever, and you can see virtual tours of just about every house anymore. This whole thing, that was conversational, and at the beginning stages, COVID-19's accelerated that exponentially. We've gone to a place where I think we just sold in 2 months' time our 100th home virtually without seeing the buyer. Mm-hmm. Buyer see the home virtually, getting a full virtual tour, having all of the paperwork, not paperwork, all done on DocuSign online. Mm-hmm. And then actually doing the walkthrough virtually when their home is delivered with our warranty service representative, basically taking their phone and whether it was FaceTime or whatever app, walking them through to show them how their home functions and anything that needed to be fixed if there was anything to be fixed. Hmm. And I think we've sold 100 homes just in the last few months doing that. And so I see that as the beginning of the future, because think about it. Ours have been being sold like that for a long time. We've been dinosaurs. We don't change greatly or quickly. This has caused us to accelerate that in a big way. And I think it appeals to a different customer base than we've been dealing with. I think as the millennials have become a much more powerful, you know, force in the home buying arena, that's been a tool that's resonated with them. But on the other side of it, the aging boomers, it's actually been one that resonates with them too. They don't have to go get in a car and drive around and look at houses that they don't like or want, and they can narrow it down even further this way.
Especially when it can take, you know, so long to find that right one. Sometimes they use that as a means to maybe see things without putting in all that effort at first and maybe doing it, weeding things out or something like that. So that's good. Are there other emerging things in the industry right now that maybe it would be good for our viewers to be aware of, and things maybe coming around the pike?
I think for our business, I think the acceleration of what we were just talking about is just going to grow more. I think how we interface and how we function and work, I think we have found in these 3 months we've all been at home that there's a lot of people that can work virtually from home and do a really good job and be very productive. And so I would bet that the commercial real estate world is going to change pretty dramatically in the coming years, because I don't think companies are going to need as much space. Although the commercial brokers would tell you need more space so you can have the social distancing. But from reality is we see a portion of our workforce that's going to be able to work virtually and work from home, and we're not going to need as much office space as we once did. I think the tech world is going to be a huge winner coming out of this because, they're all working on applications and hardware for us all to be able to function and work virtually. Like I said, we're selling houses virtually. I think there's a lot more that's going to be done virtually, and not just in our business, but in all kinds of businesses. And, this, form right now in a Zoom or a FaceTime or something like that, I think is just the beginning of what could be done. And it'll be really interesting to see what the tech guys come up with in terms of tools for us to be able to, do our jobs and be very productive, no matter where we're at. I found in 3 months at home, other than being able to get around to see my people and, interact with our teams and roll up our sleeves, I've been able to do just about anything I can do from home in my office at home. I got a computer set up here that is the exact same setup I have at my office, and I can pretty much do anything here that I could do there. So I think we're going to see more and more of that. It's going to be really interesting to see what the future holds for technology.
Yeah, so I guess with that, what I was going to ask is, what I tend to try to ask is how people can kind of stay engaged or sharpen their tool. Let's say, they got the degree. Obviously, it looks like a couple of our people have their real estate license. Are there things that you found over your experience that maybe kept you plugged in and you're kind of not shocked by changes that are happening in the industry?
Well, for my industry, so there's industry associations, and I think they're a good place to start. So, in Southern California, the Southern California Building Industry Association has, I think they call it the Next Gen group, but they have monthly meetings for the whole membership. But then they also have a smaller membership for people that are just coming out of college or are new to the business and are trying to advance their careers. And I've spoken at several of their activities or events too. And it's a great networking opportunity. It's a great place to hear new ideas and see things. I don't know if they have it this year, but the biz, I call it the biz show. It's a convention type deal. I think it's typically in Long Beach. It's a place to see products and services and meet people and, just to see what's happening in our business and what some of the changes in building material, everything from building materials to technology to, just pure networking opportunities.
So that's something I'm always curious about, because I do think it depends on where you're at. Because I feel like in student affairs, or where I'm kind of at, we have a conference and we'll have like a student fee. And we get really excited when we meet a student who's not affiliated or not being sponsored to get there, and they're just there because they want to learn. Is that similar, or is there a different? Do you have different advice for how that may be for the real estate industry?
Yeah, I think, like I said, I think I'd look for opportunities for, anytime you see somebody that's a speaker that might be interesting to go to, something like that, even if you have to pay for it, it might be worth it. It's always good to get plugged into that. And then, like I said, depending on the industry that you're in, every industry has industry associations, and they have regular meetings and events and things like that. Those are great things to plug into. And again, you got to push yourself out of maybe your comfort zone a little bit. And go up and introduce yourself to somebody and chat with them and get to know them and, do it again and again and again and again.
Do you mind talking a little bit, we just got a quick note about talking a little bit about property management as a sector within everything, and maybe how that's working. I know for COVID, I'm sure there was a bunch of things in individual properties that were being managed and how everything was working there that had a big impact, but anything about just kind of that field within the overall?
So property management, yeah. So there's a couple of different components of property management. Usually it's associated with dealing with income producing properties, apartments, commercial centers, things like that. So that's not part of what my business is.
Okay.
But I would tell you, in the world today, you've had a pretty big shift in this last downturn from home ownership to renters. And I'd say the rental world, both single family detached for rent, which is a blossoming industry. I think there's going to be a lot more of that because there's a lot of people that don't want to buy for various reasons. Maybe they can't afford to buy, they can't afford the down payment. Maybe they're regularly mobile, meaning they might live in one city and they get relocated 2 years later, by way of their job. Maybe they just don't want to be, tied down to a house, but they need a house, right? They have 2 kids and a dog, and that just doesn't work in an apartment, or it can, but it's maybe not as comfortable. But, in the last downturn, some big institutional investors went up and bought up, a lot of the foreclosed homes, and that really began the platform for that. And now what we're seeing, and we have a partnership with a company that we actually go out and develop projects specifically just for that. And again, another place where technology is being utilized to manage and to work through that. So that would be an interesting place to explore, the single family rent, zone, because I think they're probably further ahead in terms of just, how they're managing properties that are just spread all over the place, and doing it with utilizing technology. And I just think there's some really smart people, and there's a lot of money chasing after it. All of the money.
And exactly, the money comes back a little bit there. We got another question that came in, and I think it kind of ties to that point you mentioned about the various states that you essentially oversee when it comes to your business. And then you mentioned all the counties and how the counties work in California versus Washington versus other areas. I mean, and that's not even to mention the city ordinances, right? So, how does the function look like when it comes to your organization? Is there a tree of some sort, or how does that work for staying abreast so that way you're not, doing anything against the policy or law, depending on which state?
Yeah, it's great question. So when this whole thing started, we formed a task force, and it was made up of, corporate VP of construction, a corporate attorney, and then a few operational folks. And really what their job was to do was to make sure that we understood all of the orders that were being issued everywhere that we worked. And from there, we then developed protocols that either followed them to the T or actually exceeded them. And I'd say in most cases, we're more conservative than even some of the orders have been, just to be on the safe side. Feel very committed to making sure that we're keeping our employees safe and keeping our customers safe. And so we've gone beyond what some of the orders have been, but they are tracking those, that's all they do, is they track those. And if there's anything that changes, they issue us a new protocol, new training. We have to then turn that around, train our teams. We then have to turn around and train our subcontractor base. We have to make sure that we're monitoring all of that on site, just to ensure that we're complying with all that. So it's almost like a complete, department unto itself that is helping us manage that, to make sure that we're not getting outside the lines. Because the last thing we want to have happen is, to get shut down. That's not good for our reputation, and it just shows a lack of discipline, and that's not us. So.
Great. So what we've been doing at the end there, thank you so much for that. And what we've been doing at the last 10 minutes or so is just any questions that are out there. But before that, I did want to ask one that came up a little earlier, and it's more about you, and just kind of when it comes to, have you hit that penultimate or that pinnacle position for yourself? You're the president now. I don't know if that is that, or do you have more that you're reaching for, and just kind of curious about your trajectory at this point?
Yeah, well, I'm actually one of 5 area presidents. So there's 5 areas in the country. So I cover the West. I would tell you at this point in my career, it's really about how do I continue to advance how we do things. It's really about how do I make sure that I have the best people around me, the people that I want to work with and enjoy working with, because I get a lot out of that. And a lot of energy comes from that. A lot of learning comes from that. And so it's probably less about climbing the corporate ladder anymore. And it's more about the experiential component of my job, which is really a job. It's been a joy for a long time. But it's not about, hey, I've got to be the CEO and I'm over that. I'm not on that trajectory anymore. And a little bit of that comes just as you get, a certain age, I'm 56 and I don't necessarily need to continue to do that, but I still want to be relevant. I still want to be participatory. I still want to add value. And as long as I'm doing that and I'm in a position that allows for that, that's exciting to me. And that's what I have.
Thank you, Brian. That's really great to hear. Noemi, I'm going to ask you, well, actually, before I throw it over to Noemi, let me just see if there's any further questions that are out there. Feel free to throw those in the Q&A. I think we really got to dive a lot into Brian's experience, which includes, of course, his first job, his first position, and those, baseball games with some pizza and beer, always good. And then, various other jobs in between there and experiences through crises and now the pandemic. So I think we've heard a lot and, other advice as well. But if you have other questions, definitely feel free to throw those in there. I'm not seeing any more at the moment. So what I'm going to do is see if Noemi wants to kind of chime in at this point. We're sort of like 4 minutes ahead of schedule, but I think that's perfectly fine. Noemi?
Thank you, James. Thank you, Brian. did have a question. I know, Brian, you talked a little bit about networking at the beginning and using social media. Are you on LinkedIn where some of our viewers could possibly follow you, befriend you on LinkedIn?
I am, but I don't use it.
Okay.
I keep getting hit with all these friend requests or not friend requests, but connections. And I'm not a good user of social media. I'll just say that.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's what's that?
Just if anyone has any questions, they could send them to us, and we'll make sure we'll forward them on to you to get them answered.
Well, I'll make a commitment that I'll reactivate my activity on LinkedIn. So anybody wants to reach out, please feel free.
So Brian, what I promise, I will reach out at minimum and just say hi. That's what I want to do.
Right.
You mean you're going to test me?
No, not at all. No. But anyone else here too, may do that as well. Just we have found that's been really popular.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Brian. Thank you, James. It was a great conversation. We have, some recent grads and some alum that have graduated a while ago, but great conversations. Thank you for everyone for joining us today. And this session was recorded, and it will live on our website. So feel free, once it's up, you could, watch it on your own time or share it with fellow alumni and students. So just a reminder, talking about social media, follow us at CSUB Alumni to learn about our future 49er chats and other programs that we have available. Thank you and have a great day.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody. Stay safe. Go Beach.
Go Beach. There we go.